A magic square is a series of numbers arranged in a square such that every column, row, both of the diagonals, the four corners and the four centre squares add up to the number you chose. And you can do all of this in less than 5 seconds. So let's say the number 58 is selected. Then every row, column, the diagonals and all of the outside and middle 2x2 grids all add up to 58. So how is it done? Well, to prepare, I drew a 4x4 grid. And already I had these numbers written down. In fact, there are only 4 blank numbers that I will have to fill in. That's my preparation done. So now for the performance. I ask for any number from 20 to 100. Let's say we're given 42. Take their number of 42 and subtract 20 from it, giving us 22. And write this in the top left corner. That's the hard bit done. Now we shall just add 1 on, take 1 away, and add 2 like this. So 22 add 1 gives us 23. 22 take away 1 is 21. And finally, 22 add 2 is 24. That's all there is to it. And every row, column, diagonal and 2x2 square makes their number. Now let's try together. So take out a sheet of card and a pen or marker. Draw a 4x4 grid like this. And copy these numbers down. Now it's your turn to try on your own. The number I select is 30. So don't forget what to do. In the top left hand corner, you're going to take 20 away from my number. That number you've just written, we will call A. In the next column, you need to write A plus 1. In the next column, A minus 1. And in the last column, A plus 2. Let's see if you got the answers right. In the top left column you should have written 10, then 10 add 1 was 11, 10 take away 1 is 9, and in the last column it's A plus 2, which is 12. If you did that, then you'll be left with a magic square where every row and column adds up to the number 30. It's easy to learn, and if you followed, you can now perform the magic squares. Good luck. Hello, my name's Matthew Garrett and welcome to my lecture. I'm from Northamptonshire in England and I perform a lot of events. Close-up magic, stage magic, wedding fairs sometimes I work at. So today what you're going to be seeing is the material that I use. It's commercial material, it's things that we can do completely surrounded, and there'll be quite a lot of variety. So I hope you enjoy the lecture today. The first item I'm going to show you is a close-up version of the magic squares. Let's just see the effect and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So, I've got a blank grid, and Brian, would you just give me a number out loud between 20 and 100? What number would you like?
26.
26. So I'm going to write that on the grid here, and I'm going to put your name underneath. Now what I'm going to attempt to do is to fill in this grid such that each row and each column adds up to your magic number. Be kind, a simple magician at work. How long would you give me to do that?
Oh, 2 or 3 minutes.
And it's done. So let me just explain. Each row and each column adds up to your number. So 12 and 7 is 19, plus the 1's 20, plus the 6 is 26. The next row down, 8 and 2 is 10, plus the 11, 5 is 26. 5, 10, 3 is the 18, plus the 8 is 26. 6 and 4 is 10, plus the 7 and 9, it makes 26. I had time to do the verticals, I had time to do the 4 corners, the 4 squares in the middle, and the diagonals. No matter which way you look at it, the entire grid adds up to your number of 26. Thank you. So what we've seen is a very quick performance of magic squares, and it's based on an idea by Roy Johnson from Leicester. It uses the out to lunch principle. So what I have is I've got elastic bands going around the pad on both sides like this, and when I pull a piece of paper out, you'll notice that all of the numbers underneath are coloured in. So here we go. So this is just half a sheet of paper, and when I pull it out, I've got the rest of the numbers written in beneath. So it means that what I actually have to do is to fill in 4 numbers and the grid is complete. So it's going to be quite simple to perform. Now this effect is particularly good for wedding fairs. If someone's just walking straight past, I can ask them very quickly, just give me a number, and they will give a number, and then just before they walk past, you can give them the completed sheet. Catches people by surprise. It explains on here exactly what it is, directs people to my website, and gives them a little puzzle on the back so they can have a go at doing a magic square as well. So a lot of pros of it. It's different than cards, so I found that people that weren't necessarily interested in card magic or visual magic, well, it seemed to be more the analytical mathematicians, so the magic squares worked quite well for them. So it's something I found works very nice. I'm sure a lot of magicians are familiar with magic squares on stage, so if you do perform it on stage, why not also perform the effect for close-up as well? So let's go through the method so we'll be very clear on exactly what's happening. And I'm going to keep things simple at the start, so I'm going to explain the starting method, and then we'll gradually make it a little bit more complicated and add some different layers as we go on through. First of all, I've got all of the numbers written in, so let's go through the method. I got the number of 26. There we go, I've written that at the bottom. The hardest bit of maths that I have to do is in the top corner here. I have to take 20 away from their number. So 26 minus 20 gives me the new number of 6. This is the new number here, and I have to add 1 onto the new number. So 6 add 1 is 7. And from the 6 I have to take 1 away, that gives me 5. And the last thing I have to do is to add 2 on over here, so 6 add 2 is 8. So the maths is really simple, and it's very, very quick and instant to do. Now you can pretend to write the other numbers in. Personally, I just like to impress them by the speed. Boomf, it's done. And the extra convincers that you have in here are the fact that on the sheet you've got their name. So they did see it was blank beforehand. You have written their name on it, so it's these extra convincers that, well, you must have written it in. So now there's the basic effect. Very good for close-up, but now I hit upon a problem. I can't repeat it. I've done it once. Now if someone else says, can you do mine, or if there are other people at the table, I can't repeat it because they're going to get exactly the same grid, just with 4 numbers different. So, and they also might question how fast I've written it. So to combat that, how fast did you write it, I put blank grids in. So I have got some sheets that are completely blank, and then I can just fill in all of the numbers in front of them, because I do remember the numbers that were pre-written. So that's my blank grid, which is my proof. If they say, well, you didn't write that in, I can act as if I'm explaining it to them. Ah, well, look, what was the number you said? And I will just talk through as I write the numbers down. So that's another phase. How I know which grid I've got, whether it's a blank grid or whether it's a grid with the numbers pre-written, goes to the letter I have on the first letter of the word. I've got learn how to do this trick. Well, the L is my low grid. The L, the first letter, tells me that this is a low grid. This one here It says book Matthew, starts with a B, it's telling me it's a blank grid. On the other side, I've got M for Matthew, a medium grid, and underneath that I've got how does it work, the H for being a high grid. So the first letter is telling me what grid I've got directly underneath the blank bit of paper. So that's covered the blank grid and the low grid so far. Now if I turn it round the other side, so Brian, give me a higher number this time, let's say a number between 40 and 100.
76.
76. So if the spectator gives me a number that's higher than 40, instead of writing on this side, all I do is I flip the bit of paper around to the other side, and this is where I'm left with my medium and high grids. So I take the number you said 76, was that right, Brian?
Yep.
So I'm going to write 76, and the person's name, Brian. Now the maths is very simple. What I want you to think is, on the low grid, a unit equals 1. And on the medium grid, a unit equals 2. And on the high grid, a unit equals 3. So, instead of taking 20 off, now I'm going to take off 20 units of 2, which means I'm going to remove 40 from their number. So 76 minus 40 is 36. So as I take this out here, this is all towards me, I now write the first number in as 36. Last time I added 1 on, this time a unit is 2, so I'm going to add on 2. So 36 adds 2 is 38. From the 36 last time I took 1 away, this time I take 2 away, so I get 34. And the last thing I had to do, instead of adding 2 onto the number, now I add on 2 units of 2, so that's 4. So over here 36 plus 4 is 40. Now this grid will look entirely different than the last grid. Well, the reason are all of the numbers are multiplied by 2 that were pre-written, and the other thing I've done to hide it more is it's been rotated vertically. That's to say that where I have the number 1 on this grid, on the other grid it's going to be multiplied by 2, so it'll be number 2, and instead of being at the top, it's at the bottom. So the whole grid's been rotated vertically, multiplied by 2, which makes it completely repeatable, so that no one is going to sit with these two grids side by side and go, well, they're the same, because they absolutely do not look the same whatsoever. And the other thing that we've got on here, to confuse people even further, is that I've got a high grid. Now, for the high numbers as well, so we use the number 76 this time. With the low grid, I've got pre-written on all the numbers from 1 to 12. Now, if I had a number like 76 chosen, I'm going to have 4 numbers that are going to stick out like a sore thumb, because they're going to be a lot higher than the other numbers that are pre-written. So you get all the numbers from 1 to 12, and I'm going to have these numbers like 56. It looks odd. It draws attention to those 4 numbers. But you'll notice with the medium grid, now all of the numbers are a lot more similar. I've got numbers 24, 34, 40, 18, 38. So it really blends in. There's no numbers that stick out like a sore thumb. So now let's go to the high grid. And I said this time the numbers are multiplied by 3. A unit this time is 3. I'm going to stick with Brian's same number of 76. So I'll write 76 on here. I'll pull out the grid. So the first time a unit was 1, we took off 20. The second time a unit was 2, so we took off 20 times by 2, which was 40. This time, 20 times by 3, we're going to take off 60 from the number. So 76 minus the 60 is 16. Instead of adding on 1 on the first grid, 2 on the second grid, this time we add on 3. So 16 add on 3 is 19. 16 take away 3 is 13. And a 16 this time, instead of adding on 3, we're going to add on 6. So we're going to add on, over the side here, the 16 plus 6, giving us 22. So now I'm left with a grid where all of the numbers look very similar to one another. To read out the numbers on the top row, I've got 12, 19, 18, 27. And the last example, on the medium grid, which also added up to 76, I had 8, 38, 12 and 18. So the numbers look very different, but it's a way of performing the magic squares repeating the effect, convincing them that you can write things in very, very fast. And I find just a very different, very quick and direct effect to show. Works great, as I said, for wedding fairs, it works for walk around and at the table, something a bit different that I hope you'll enjoy in putting into your close-up routines. That is the magic squares.
We were knocked out by the sequences and the impossibility, rings jumping on and off, and then handing out the rings to be examined with the small rings on. I mean, our mind was expanded by this innovation, and we had seen nothing like it before.
We might just be lucky and catch Matthew Garrett doing his routine. If we can, that'd be awesome.
Oh my God!
The legend himself, the one and only Ninja Ringmaster, Matthew Garrett. How good was this ring session?
It was epic.
I think we need to do some, oh yes.
He's got it!
Holy mackerel! Giving this 1,000%.
Infinity squared.
Sold out.
You sold out?
It's obvious it works. It's a classic of magic. It's got a killer ending.
It really is a fantastic routine.
That's pretty cool. All right, say goodbye.
Goodbye. This lecture is going to be useful if you do perform the linking rings. We're going to be looking at lots of different techniques. Also, this lecture is going to be very useful if you don't perform the linking rings, even if you're never ever going to perform the linking rings. The reason for that is we're going to look at such a cross range of techniques that you can use in other types of magic that you perform. How to use forwards and relaxed states, the importance of crossing the gaze, how we can use patter to strengthen effects, varying methods, how we're going to look at time misdirection. So within the linking rings there's a lot of different techniques that we're going to be looking at. So let's look at some of those now, widen our understanding. First of all, when magicians think how the linking rings works, well, let's ask the cameraman. Brian, linking rings trick, just tell me honestly, how do you think the trick is done?
Magnets.
Okay, and when we think of it as a trick, that's the sort of start point, isn't it? Magnets, any other methods?
Gaps in the rings.
Gaps in the rings, good. Anything else perhaps?
Locking devices.
Yeah. And I would say when we ask magicians how the linking rings is done, we will get a few different solutions. Gaps, maybe a trick count, switching the rings, rings that are permanently joined. If you were to ask a lay person how do they think the trick is done, the most common answer would be a gap in the rings, and generally that's as far as their thinking takes them. The difference being, a lay audience tends to look for one method. This is how the trick is done. Magicians look at more methods, because we understand that by varying methods it makes it harder to follow. Audiences just looking for that one simple method, whereas magicians, by combining methods, an audience can left confused and bewildered. So now let's look at more methods. This is as far as the magician gets. The magician gets a gap, a switch, a count, rings that are always joined, perhaps a locking ring and magnets. However, we're going to look at more methods. We're going to be looking at how we can use time misdirection, visual misdirection, how we can use crossing the gaze, patter, the way the patter can strengthen the effect, no key methods, how can you join rings that have got no gaps, fake links, fire to add effects to it. So the secret of the linking rings, the true secret of the linking rings, is that there are many secrets. Some are still being discovered. So in this lecture, what I'm hoping that is you'll keep an open mind. You might think you know how the trick's done. We're going to explore some different methods you might not have already thought of. And also, it should give you thoughts about how you can apply some of these principles to other effects that you're performing. So people are familiar with one ring joining on to another ring. It can get monotonous and it can get boring. So instead of just joining hoops together, why don't we have a think about what other objects we could join? And this changes the routine. For example, if I'm working in a corporate event, a very common thing is people will be wearing lanyards. I can reach across, join the lanyard, go as if I'm pulling the person over. And it just changes the dimensions of the routine. Now this is so important to me that I wanted to give a good cross range of different objects that I might join. In fact, whenever I'm working, I'm looking around for things that I can join. If I look to the floor, I've got a bag. It could be a lady's handbag, for example. I can join it, go as if I'm walking off. And think about the visuals for this. If I've got a cameraman around, rather than someone standing there just joining rings together, now I've got the lady's handbag, I've got her face, her reaction to it, all of the things are held up by the face. And so we've got very different visuals. What it says to the other people in the room watching is there's some fun going on there, something interesting, and me walking off with the object. I can disconnect, I'm just using the gap, so everything that I'm showing you now is just a variety of different objects that you can join. Jack Beavis is an English magician. He performs linking toilet seats together. Again, great fun, right? Coat hangers, there are linking coat hangers as an effect. But look how visually different it looks. Now, with the techniques for this, we can join any object that we like, so long as it's got a hole in the centre. In fact, you can have holes in objects that aren't supposed to. I could put a hole into a coin and then I could link a coin. I'm always linking through the thin side as an object. I link through this way. So it doesn't actually matter if the object is very wide, so long as it's thin. I have to just be able to go in one dimension. So that means that wide objects, they're good. Bad objects, well, let's take a look at the duct tape that I've got here. If it were a thinner roll and there were less tape on it, no problem. The actual going through this way is not difficult. It's this thickness, because if you look at the size of the gap compared to the size of the object, I would look at this and go, that's not going through there. If I wanted it to, then I could make an adjustment. I could widen the key, and I just pulled it, and now I know that I could go through this object. There are cheeky moves. You can move the gap underneath. So by moving it down, now you can get this view. I think it's fun. I don't think it's necessary. The important thing that I do think you need to get from this section of the instructions is to join other things. So we're looking for objects that are thin to go through. Here's a variety. A watch, you could take a watch off someone, go straight the way through, you go off. Or we've got in here a bangle. This could be anything. This is like a kid's bangle. Once again, exactly the same technique, but the visuals, it's looking very different. The person, the objects, the photographs that you're ending up as a magician now are looking very different. Well, a rope. Linking through here is nice, and we can use the time misdirection with other objects. I think ring on rope routines are very common with magicians in any case. Bag of marbles, but once again I can use the strap and I can link, and then I can then take the second strap at the other side and I can link that as well. And I always think it's funny to go as if I'm stealing the person's items, just walking off with it. Have a great evening, thanks very much, see you later on. Let's look at some more objects, because I really think that this is the way of making your routine different. You're jazzing the routine. Don't stop here. Think about a cameraman with a strap. I walk over to the cameraman, I join the strap of the camera, and if I've got a smoke device on, I would then reach up, smoke comes out the person's camera. So what are we seeing? All of a sudden, instead of seeing a generic rings routine, we're seeing smoke from a camera, the cord linked. It's a funny situation. Spring. Again, we're just making the point that if it's a wide object, it doesn't matter. It's the thin side that we're going through. I've got another cord. This is actually a microphone clip, but it could be anything. We're getting the idea. Anything with a hole, anything that's cord based, anything that's solid. So now a pen. We still get the effect, right? I'm holding on to both sides. It's an impossible link through with an object. So we're understanding that we don't even have to use objects that have got a hole in the middle to get the effect. Scissors. You can go from one side of the scissors to the other side of the scissors. Playing with the toys. A little bit out of date now, perhaps. These were really doing the thing a while ago. Fidget spinners. And I won't go into more detail, but you can link from one to another. You can have them spin and link as you go down. A pouch bag, it could be a glass case. So there we go. We can go onto the cords. So we're looking at within object, looking at which part of an object can join. Glasses, I just think you've got to be quite careful if you're borrowing glasses from people, but certainly you can link them. If you want to do the comedy gag, you could get glasses that have got a lens missing, so you join through one of the lenses. You can go through the centre. There's no problem with doing it. I just don't think you want to grab people's glasses by the lenses, and objects like this, I just think you've got to be so careful with. But you can see that it does work. I would just go through the handle of the glasses, pass it round, and I would give them straight back. It's not my favourite object to join, although it does work. Keys, keychains, yeah, they work well. So we can go through here, we can have the keys go on. So I really want you to expand what you join. Don't just think a rings routine has to be mundane, one ring joining to another. I just think you're missing it. You're missing the point. It has to be having fun, borrowing different objects, joining different things. And that's the end of this section of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. This lecture is going to be useful if you do perform the linking rings. We're going to be looking at lots of different techniques. Also, this lecture is going to be very useful if you don't perform the linking rings, even if you're never ever going to perform the linking rings. The reason for that is we're going to look at such a cross range of techniques that you can use in other types of magic that you perform. How to use forwards and relaxed states, the importance of crossing the gaze, how we can use patter to strengthen effects, varying methods, how we're going to look at time misdirection. So within the linking rings, there's a lot of different techniques that we're going to be looking at. So let's look at some of those now, widen our understanding. First of all, when magicians think how the linking rings works, well, let's ask the cameraman. Brian, linking rings trick, just tell me honestly, how do you think the trick is done?
Magnets.
Okay, and when we think of it as a trick, that's the sort of start point, isn't it? Magnets, any other methods?
Gaps in the rings.
Gaps in the rings, good. Anything else perhaps?
Locking devices.
Yeah. And I would say when we ask magicians how the linking rings is done, we will get a few different solutions. Gaps, maybe a trick count, switching the rings, rings that are permanently joined. If you were to ask a lay person, how do they think the trick is done? The most common answer would be a gap in the rings, and generally that's as far as their thinking takes them. The difference being, a lay audience tends to look for one method. This is how the trick is done. Magicians look at more methods because we understand that by varying methods it makes it harder to follow. Audiences just looking for that one simple method, whereas magicians, by combining methods, an audience can left confused and bewildered. So now let's look at more methods. This is as far as the magician gets. The magician gets a gap, a switch, a count, rings that are always joined, perhaps a locking ring and magnets. However, we're going to look at more methods. We're going to be looking at how we can use time misdirection, visual misdirection, how we can use crossing the gaze. Patter, the way the patter can strengthen the effect. No key methods. How can you join rings that have got no gaps? Fake links, fire to add effects to it. So the secret of the linking rings, the true secret of the linking rings, is that there are many secrets. Some are still being discovered. So in this lecture, what I'm hoping that is you'll keep an open mind. You might think you know how the trick's done. We're going to explore some different methods you might not have already thought of. And also, it should give you thoughts about how you can apply some of these principles to other effects that you're performing. We're now going to look at the standard linking rings routine with the different techniques. A quick count of the rings. It tends to suggest the rings are separate. Next, the key. Next, rings that are always joined. These strings were joined from the very beginning. Now we're going to introduce time misdirection and a little bit of visual misdirection as well. Here's the move. 1, 2, 3. So what we saw there was visual misdirection. The audience is expecting the move to happen in the middle, whereas in actual fact, it's happening across the other side. All that happens is the hand rotates, and at one point, it passes through the gap. So this is visual misdirection. 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to add time misdirection as well as the visual misdirection. I do the move on the count of 2 rather than on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Same move, just more techniques added. Now we're going to use forwards and relaxed states. When we're forwards, the attention is on. When we move back, we can do the move and come forwards again. So that's a use of forwards and relaxed states. Magicians will often tell a joke. So we're telling a joke, funny line, move back, we start to do the effect again. And we've already done the move on the offbeat. Crossing the gaze is done where you're showing something to an assistant one side, and as we move around, it's joined. I can show that technique again from the front here. I can do the same move, I'm just doing the same move with a visual misdirection. So this is the standard move that we just looked at. Now if I'm just changing my angles, we can get an unlink where it looks joined. And now as I turn, you get the perception difference as well. So what we're doing when we're performing the linking rings is we're using very simple techniques such as a gap and joined rings, but we're enhancing them now with the correct time misdirection, the visual misdirection, using forwards and relaxed states at the right time and crossing the gaze. So when we put these things into a bigger routine, we'll see how all of these things work to make a stronger performance. So a basic routine, just using constantly the keyring and using the same crash link, I think after a while is going to get the audience guessing how it's done. But by combining the methods, they don't. Now one of the problems for magicians is this keyring. This is the bit that people are worried about. What if the spectator says, right now I want to examine the rings, what are you going to do about it? And this is a problem that I wanted to solve. I really wanted rings to immediately join and go straight out for examination. Now I'm not pretending that's not a problem that other people haven't looked at in the past, because it is. That's the purpose of a faked count. That's the purpose of having rings that are permanently joined, so you can join them and then the spectator gets that feeling that they're instantly examining them. But there's more that can be done. And this is where we come on to another one of my techniques, which is the technique of GIR. GIR allows the magician to do the impossible, to take solid rings that genuinely have no gap, yet we can still join the rings, they can immediately go out for examination. When we take the rings back from the spectator, we can immediately pass them out for examination. So the methods that we're using are different as well. I'm going to be talking about this in more detail in a while, but just to give you an overview, what have we done? Well, it's an expanded ring. Now people were using expanded rings back in the 1930s, Fitzke and Hilliard were doing this. But they were using loose, oversized rings that would pass along a chain. So imagine a chain of 4 or 5 rings, they would take a bigger hoop and it works its way up the chain. You couldn't do that for close-up. You would notice the size difference for one thing, and secondly, no real benefit because you would just show it and it couldn't be examined in the same way. So what I've done is I've made this ring thinner and very fractionally bigger to disguise the size difference. They're never held like I'm holding them now, so the audience are going to be seeing them in positions like this where they won't notice the size discrepancy. All that happens is this ring passes over the top of the other two. So it's still linked, it's just not linked in the way you might expect. So this is the method. What does that mean? Because it's tight fitting, I can force this over the top. I change my techniques, so I'm pressing it like this, and it's going down. Now let's look at some different ways of doing the same thing. Using those techniques that we've just looked at, this is what we want to do. Apply this to all of your magic. Look at how you can use time misdirection in your effects. So, I can join the ring straight away, and I can show it's linked. Now, I might like to consider doing that same thing with a delay. So, exactly the same move, and all I've done is I've thought, how can I use time misdirection? So, I can join it, it's linked, but I don't show it as linked. Instead, I wait, I click my fingers and then it's linked. I can apply time misdirection to the unlink as well. I can either immediately pass it out for examination, or if I want to use time misdirection, so here's the starting point, now I can show it's still linked, it's not, I've unlinked it, and instead I can pull it off the bottom. So you can get a different effect almost just by varying the time, the moment when you show to the audience that you've completed the effect. Crossing the gaze. Now I can look at how, if I'm showing it here to a spectator, do I think the move looks better front on, like this? Or do I think the move looks better going from side to side? So that would be to pass the rings to the spectator this side, and as I do the move, I'm going to move across. So that would look like this. And it's linked. So you can decide what methods work for you. If we use the forwards and relaxed state, don't forget I'm only applying this to one thing. You can apply this whether it's your sponge ball magic, whether it's your cards tricks. Just look at each move that you do and see, would it be improved by delaying the moment? Would it be improved by crossing the gaze, or maybe forwards and relaxed states? Let's look at a forwards and relaxed states now. I'm back here. I'm going to do the move as I move forwards. Anything forwards has this open look. It looks as if you're showing people. Anything held back can either look relaxed, as we saw earlier, the forward state, the relaxed state, or it can look guarded. I'm protecting this object. I'm holding it close to my body. I think we see that a lot with cards. A nice card handler will shuffle here. A novice may hold the cards here to protect them so they don't drop them. So, looking at the forwards and relaxed states, the rings are linked. All I'm going to do is the move as I move forwards this time. So here it is linked, here it is disconnected, and it looks like a very open display. I pass these two rings to one person, this to another person. The methods that I've shown you I'm not really worried about. They're very simple. I've looked at a key ring, I've looked at an oversized ring, but the extra methods I really want you to take from this is how you can apply forwards and relaxed states, how you can apply crossing the gaze, time misdirection, visual misdirection to any of the magic that you're performing. Thank you. We've looked at time misdirection and some other techniques that we can apply. Whatever the magic effect is that we're looking at, I think an important thing to do is to go right back to basics and really try and look at what are we showing the audience, what is the effect. With the linking rings, I think it's pretty obvious in a sense. We're showing that rings are separate, that they're solid. We're then showing that they link. So in terms of magically, spinning a ring around is a flourish. It might look very pretty, but the magic moments, they're the times where you might want to click your fingers, have something happen. The magic moments would be broken down into the ring links. You may perceive it to be magically different, that you've got a chain of rings. Then, when the rings separate, so you're showing a linking and an unlinking of rings. The shapes and the flourishes that you might see in the middle, making a ball, making a globe, making a swing, spinning the rings around, they're moments. They're not magic, they're just enhancing the magic. So rings, very simply, are a pure way of showing a solid passing through a solid, and they're symbolising unity. In times of the moments that the audience are going to be clapping, well, it's when one ring links, a whole chain ring links, and they separate. Repeating and having one link, and then another can become monotonous unless we somehow making it more impossible. You might accentuate it by joining a wider object. That could be perceived as being more impressive. A teeny tiny object, maybe using fire. So when we're routining, a routine has to go somewhere. It can't just be one ring joins to another and we expect the audience to be engaged. In order to make them engaged, to create the wow moments, the magically different moments, we need to be doing something different. Whether it's to accentuate size, how silent it is that it goes through. So we need to look at those moments to accentuate the magic. So that's the effect. Now, Juan Tamariz, I like looking at performers from around the world. When I look at the performers from my local club, they tend to do everything in a similar way to each other because that's their friends. It's very much what's in fashion. And I think it carries on the English trend. English magicians look at the same material, so we tend to work in the same way. Now, of course, we've got the internet, so things globally change. Spanish performers work in different ways than English performers. Juan Tamariz observed, a spectator will not try to link separate rings, but they will attempt to undo joined rings. Therefore, joined rings are the problem. Emotionally, he feels happy when the rings separate. So it's all very well knowing these different theories. It sounds very nice, but how does it actually work with magic? Is it going to help you? Well, for me it did. I've got my effect, the GIR, so I've got the larger ring that goes over the top. So what Juan Tamariz's mentality says to me is, if I pass these to a spectator, then they might try and undo them. Potentially, they could work out they could do this. But if I pass them the rings in this state, then they're not going to try and join them. So ways I can use this to my advantage, I might, for example, join the rings and show that they're very fairly, there are no gaps, and then I might pass them out knowing that they're not going to try and join the objects. If I am going to pass the rings out in a linked state, now I understand that there's a potential problem. And I handle this by saying to the spectator, make sure there's no gap in the rings. And that's diverted them. The problem is no longer pulling it apart. The problem is there a gap in the rings? And they're now looking at the rings in a different way. So that's how you can use the different theories to help you. And I've changed my mentality with the rings a lot. I've tried to look at the different theories that are going on and to change the techniques, keeping in my mind all of the while that the thing I want to have happen is I want to join rings and immediately have them passed out for examination. And that takes us on to the next effect that I've come up with, which is called Ninja Plus. So let's look at a very basic routine with Ninja Plus, and then I'll talk about it afterwards. A ring joins, it can jump from one hoop straight through to another one, disconnects and joins, completely examinable. Let's take this a stage further. Watch the ring move down from one to another. The large rings disconnect. The ring comes off once again, can be examined. So that is Ninja Plus. What I've done is I've changed the techniques to make them easy to perform, and also to ensure that the ring is able to go straight out for examination. So what's used? A finger ring, a ring that's permanently joined, and a key ring as well. I'll leave these on the table just instead of using my pocket so you can see what happens. I talked about making moves easy. The original technique that's used with joining hoops is this. You hold a ring, you clamp it, you look for the centre point and you pass the ring through. And there's different ways to do this. You might like the effect to be that the ring ends up in the centre, like this, or you might want the effect to be that the ring is just passing from one side of the metal object to the other, which would look more like this. When we think of smaller objects, that same technique's no longer possible, because if I press down on here and the object moves round, you now get this awkwardness, it's got to move a long way. So I change the action to be vertical. I move the key ring, the gap, beneath my little finger. That stops any finger motion. If I have it here, I'd have to open my fingers up. So I move it to there, now there's no finger motion needed at all. I don't move the base object at all, I don't want it to move back, so I lock this hand off. This hand does not move. This hand moves straight down, and as it moves straight down, it goes through the object. Once it's gone through, I bring the object to the centre, to here. So let's watch that up to speed, like this, and slowly, like this. So that's the first technique, the change of how to make it possible to use a smaller object. Now the one I just showed you is easier still. It's this. Here's what I'm doing. I'm pressing down in the middle of the object. So if I press here, clearly the object can't move, but if I press there, it raises it up and it will link. So here's the exposed view. If you're practicing this, all you need is any key ring. Use your imagination. Maybe you don't want to use a round object, maybe it could be something different. So you can expand your thought process. But I'm pressing down, that's causing the object to go up. As you practice, maybe you start moving to here and gradually work the hand round to start covering the gap up. When you're confident, move the little finger down so it's just resting on the gap here, and as it moves down, the gap opens up a tiny bit to let the ring through and moves back again. So when I'm performing this up to speed, it looks like this. A very simple technique. Now we're going to switch. As this goes out for examination, I can put this into my pocket and I can come out with this. It looks like nothing's changed. The move looks the same as before. Only this time, this hand is moving up and this hand is letting go. 1, 2, 3. Practice this along to the camera. It's not difficult to do. Take the ring, hold it in your fingers. You're holding them just here. You can bend the fingers. Tap, tap, tap. This hand comes up, this hand lets go. I just combine, not fast, I just do the two actions at once. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and there's the link. Now to disconnect, I don't move straight down because this ring will not move. Instead, I have to move diagonally. And as I move diagonally, you will see that this ring will swing. It's not going to swing multiple times. I don't want that look. I just want to do it once. So I'm going to move diagonally down and I'm going to catch this ring in this hand. Like this. From here to here. When you start practicing, you might want to use a big motion. Start really high, move down. As you get more comfortable, you'll find that you don't need to move far at all. And to finish the move, I'm going to show the ring in the other hand. So the action is moving up to join and moving down to disconnect. But you see, this now means we can have an object examined, we can join it and immediately pass the object out for examination, which is the moment I so wanted to achieve. We're just combining methods. So using the key ring in conjunction, this is the move I showed you earlier. I'm just doing that same move again. It links. If I do the same move again, watch what happens now. It links again. So this was the start position. I've just linked the two big rings together. And now the ring in the centre is what I like to call double linked. I'm going to move it to the bottom. To do this, I'm just going to twist this hand and the ring moves down. It's not a difficult move. Here's that sequence up to speed. Here, there it is into the centre, and now it moves from one ring to the other. See how patter helps. I'm telling the audience that the finger ring has moved from one hoop to the other. It hasn't. Just watch it and hear the patter. The ring's linked. Watch the middle. The ring's now moved from one hoop through to the middle. It's joined onto both hoops. And now the ring's moved from one hoop straight the way through to the other. So the patter is helping to tell the story as well. And these are all techniques you could apply to any magic that you're doing. Can the patter assist? I don't need to tell them what they can see. So I don't need to tell them I'm joining a ring, I'm joining it twice, it's moving. The purpose of the patter in this particular instance is to sell the fact that the ring has moved from one hoop through to the other. So patter should have a purpose. I disconnect the rings. We looked at this earlier on. We looked at how we can use the time misdirection for this. We looked at how we can twist the hands to separate. And just to finish the routine here, I did the same disconnect. I moved diagonally down, taking the ring back off. So that's a simple routine of Ninja Plus. Thank you. So we've looked at a basic routine with Ninja Plus. Hopefully I'm starting to get you to change your perception, change your thoughts about the linking rings, to open up to the possibility of other methods, to see how you might like to use some of these techniques for other magic effects that you perform. Now I'm going to tell you why I like the linking rings. And each magic effect I perform, I think about its practicalities. With the linking rings, the practicalities that I'm talking about are this. Firstly, no talking's required. That could be loud music that's being played, it could be an audience member who's hard of hearing, or it could be a language barrier. So it's nice to have effects that don't require any speech at all. I can perform this surrounded. I can perform this with an instant reset. So going straight from one table to another, I do need routines that I can instantly carry on performing. No consumables, it's metal products, so once you've bought the effect, You don't have to keep repurchasing it again. It's there ready to go. Showcasing the face. So often magicians perform routines that are facing downwards, and when you have a photographer comes around to capture the image, all they're left with is a load of less interesting shots of the table perhaps, whereas the rings are held up here. It's a chance for you to get your face, the spectator's face if you're performing the rings from one person to another. So you've got the nice visuals in there that I think are very important as well. Deceptive. It is an effect that they're not straight away going to guess, and we're doing that by combining the methods. Works for close-up, table and walking round, parlour and stage. So once you've learned to perform the linking rings, you've not just got one performance, not just your close-up, you're also developing your stage work. And in a second we're going to take a look at a stage routine using the linking rings. For all age groups, if I perform at a wedding, there might be guests there from 3 to 80 years plus. The rings is something that does work with all the ages. And I think if you've got complicated routines, they're not always going to. If they're card-based routines, people can find them wearing after a little while. But the rings is something that I find engages all age groups through and works for sight impaired. I've had to perform for blind people before. And when you do this, they can feel the rings, they happen in their hands. So each effect that I perform, I like to see its strengths and weaknesses, and the rings really do work in all environments. With that in mind, we're now going to take a look at a stage performance using the linking rings. Now the stage routine you saw me perform, not anything special. I'm not expecting you to be bowled away by it. What I would say is it was accentuating rings being joined, the long chain, and then rings separating. There's different ways to perform, and you're going to perform in whichever way suits your style. I'm going to talk you through very quickly the way I perform the rings on stage. I do the dramatic routine that you've just seen, and it only lasts for 1 minute. And then after that, I have this music change. I play the music that you're hearing now. I ask the audience, how did I do that? And I invite them to tell me how it was done. Some people might say a gap, a catch, perhaps magnets. I then invite someone to come up to the stage. I would have a single spotlight on them and a chair sat in the middle of the stage. So it's now very peaceful. I get them to sit down. I say to that person, you have the best seat in the house. You're going to be watching out for gaps. You're in charge of making sure there's no magnets, and I'd like you to watch the effect again. And then in that environment, I perform the close-up linking rings with them on the stage. It works well to about 250 seats, I would say, but you really get this, the ring in their hand, you're getting their facial reactions. So the strength of this is the audience is seeing one side, but they're also watching the spectator react. And the strength to all of my routines are the fact that there's a ring that's separate, it's immediately joined, and they can immediately check to make sure there are no gaps. And of course I go into I like to believe in magic, and just for the next 2 minutes I invite you to believe in magic too. You can talk about the childlike moments of going back to our youth where we used to believe in magic, and isn't the world a much simpler and a much nicer place when we do that? So I don't think it matters too much the patter, but music changes, facial reactions can work well on stage, and all of the same techniques that I'm using for the close-up rings play well on stage as well. So we've cut the background music off, and when you watch something like the stage rings, I don't want you to think, oh, that's the way I should do it. What I think we need to do is to look at any effect if someone else performs it and thinks, what's my style going to be? What did I take from that performance? Now, I watch and I enjoy watching a lot of the masters of the linking rings. Richard Ross is one of the most famous, and for me, he just is elegant. It's a very smooth performance. So when I watch his routine, what I take from it is, I don't want the rings to jangle and clank. I much prefer the elegance that he brings to it. Now, David Copperfield performs walking along in an art exhibition, and he knocks one of the exhibits and the ring falls down. It's providing good logic and emotion to the routine as well. Jeff McBride, a completely different routine. What a contrast. Martial arts, the power of the routine. So you get the opportunity to decide what is for you. What do you see the routine as? Victor Voitko, floating linking rings, so the really magical moments of when the rings float through the air. Shooter Gower for me is all about the preciseness. He does this wonderful spin of the ring on a table and links it, and he's just so neat and so precise with the rings. So one thing Shooter Gower said to me is this: to improve on an effect, you must feel its weakness. So if you're performing the rings, if you don't see any weakness in a performance, then you're not going to change anything. You're only ever going to perform it as well as the person you've watched. But if you see something and you feel the weakness in it, then you've got something to work on and a different direction to go in. So what I would say is, whether it's the rings or anything else, study the routines in detail. The routines, how you want it to look, the weaknesses to concentrate on eliminating, and that way you'll get a routine that means something to yourself. So before we move on with the lecture, let's summarise this section. Let's see what we've gained from it. So if you don't perform the linking rings at all, why is this lecture for you? Well, we're looking at different ways that you can put a routine and structure a routine. Structure, combining effects. We're going to be going on now to look at how we can make things more interesting. Adding visual effects such as fire and smoke. Make it visual, showing your face in the routine. Variety, what can we change? So for the rings, for me, we're going to be looking at this in more detail. It's going from wide rings, thin rings, large rings, small rings. Maybe it's the pace that we change, doing something very slowly and then something very fast. Originality. A lot of the magicians perform the ambitious card. Why is your ambitious card routine different than other people's? Why are they going to remember your routine as opposed to someone else's? The audience are going to judge themselves what's good. You need to perform these things in front of an audience to see how an audience react. I found moves that I love, tried them out, they just weren't getting the response I wanted, and at other times, particularly borrowing rings from people, I was suddenly noticing, wow, they really like this bit. How to film your magic. Now, it's very well putting a camera in front of yourself, but do you get the angles on board? When I work, quite commonly, I'll ask someone at the table to film it for me. Bride and groom have asked me to get a couple of shots. Would you mind? And that way you're getting this raw footage that you can watch back. Great for them to see. It also shows from people walking past that there's someone filming your magic, which looks great from people outside, but you're getting all of this content for yourself as well. For me, the perfect 10 minutes is important. I have to work on my rings routine. It's only going to last 2 or 3 minutes, but that 2 or 3 minutes I'm going to repeat 1,000 times. Whether it's for your friends and family, whether it's at a wedding around each of the tails, if you're learning a routine, you're not just going to perform it once, so learn it in the correct way. The techniques that we've been over, the forwards, relaxed states and misdirection, the purpose of the magic wand. With Ninja Plus, we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail. How I may have a finger ring concealed in my hand, but holding onto a larger object of the hoop, it makes my hand position look normal. Analyse the details, watch back this footage that you've got and try and frame the magic, make it take up a small place, because audiences can't concentrate if things are moving too much. They like to be focused, they like there to be a little TV screen for them to watch, so make sure the magic is always tied in. Analyse the details and then go through the music, the patterns and when to have silence in your routine. So let's look at a few more of the different things in the list, how we're going to use the fire and smoke to make things interesting, and how we're going to mix it up. How are we going to keep their interest? So visual effects. With the rings, I'm going to start to show you how I can enhance my routine by using a bit of flash string. I like using flash products with the metal because they can't damage it. It's done in a really safe way, it's nowhere near my hand, it's not an object that's going to burn, and I really do use a small piece of flash string. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to set fire to this, and in my hand I've got a ring concealed. Now we talked about the magic wand. The magic wand is the idea that a magician's hand might look strange if it's concealing an object. If I'm classic palming something, people tend to hold their hand in this sort of shape. But as soon as they pick up an object, their hand position becomes normal again. And we're using that idea here. I'm concealing the ring, but my hand position looks perfectly normal because I'm holding onto the hoop. All I'm going to do is I'm going to let the ring drop, like this. Doesn't look very special. But when I add the flash, now it does look special. Watch this. I like the use of flash because if I'm in a restaurant, so long as fire's allowed inside, which it still is to a small degree, I now get the attention of people looking across, and I want to be the magician that's able to do everything. So, all I've done is I've heated it, and I've had the ring move down. If I want to, well, I'll use another move that we looked at earlier. I showed the sequence briefly where I joined the ring, moved it, and had it moved to the bottom. It looks nice, but now let's enhance that sequence by putting flash string at the bottom. So all that's going to happen is this ring is going to move down. I'm going to use the string as a little wick. As I heat this up, all I'm going to do is let this, so the move's very easy, I'm going to let this pass down. So in performance, here's how it would look. And now they get the other dimension because I can get them to feel it, and they'll confirm that it feels a bit warmer. So we can see how the special effects such as fire can work nicely. Now I wanted a contrast in my routine as well. I've got the fast links of the Ninja Plus, where things are straight out for examination. I've got the different sized rings for GIR, where I can join rings without the need for a gap. Now I wanted to contrast it with a very slow link. And in conjunction with Brian Caswell, we came up with Ninja Fusion, which is the way of a ball fusing itself slowly to a hoop. Let's take a look at that now. So here we have a silver ball, like a pinball, if you remember those video games. And rather than join it fast, over the side here I've got a hoop. I'm going to try and slow things down. So this time, very slowly, I'm going to try and fuse the ring and the ball together. I want to show you this situation as clearly as I can. That side and that side, it's completely fused. When I say it's completely fused, it won't come off. I can still just about move the ball around, gradually fusing more. It's becoming more and more sticky and solid, more and more fused to the ball, and then the spectator can actually examine this. Whenever we like, we can take the ball back off again, and this is Ninja Fusion. So, the method we'll go through, we'll go over some special effects and ways that we can change this. The method's very simple. I have a groove on the other side of the ball, and I'm using the optical move over the side here. That's to say that my fingers are doing nothing, just giving the impression of rotating, but the groove is stationary. In the other hand, I've got a ball attached to the hoop. From the back, it's all pantomime. Very easy to do method-wise, but I'm taking my time and I use the smoke as a little effect. So if I set the smoke off again, there we go. Just goes through. And now I've got the groove on the top, so it's this way round. What I want to do, I can't release my hand because it would come off, so I want to turn the ball the other way up. Rather than do that, I approach the situation by turning the hoop around the ball. So I put my thumb on the top, raise the hoop up, turn the hoop right the way round. So now the situation is the ball is completely inside the groove. The groove is precision made, it locks in place. So as I turn the hoop back up, the groove has now in effect moved from the top to the bottom. This is the situation I'm in, nothing different to do, and the misdirection that we use when we perform this is across the gaze. So my misdirection would not just be front on, but instead, all I have to do the move is to put both hands on and turn. So the move is very easy, but to disguise it, I'm going to speak to the spectator this side, and in that crossing the gaze action, the switch is done. So we're here. In the normal routine, well, there's lots of things that I might do from here. Often I link in Ninja Plus. So this is a situation we're familiar with. But now, I've just got the key, and I'm going to join this ring on, and it makes a shape that looks a bit like Mickey Mouse. So let's just take a look at this up to speed as well. So these are all things we've looked at already. Ninja Plus is joined, it's gone through to here. I take the ball, now we come around and we get Mickey Mouse. Or, finishing flourish, take this over the side here, I can put this on, and there we go, we get Donald Trump. I mean Minnie Mouse. So you can add humour in as well if you like, whatever suits your style. To disconnect this, I might get the spectator to hold on to the ball and then pull it free. For now, I'm just going to disconnect like this. We could use the flash string back down here like we just saw if we want the effect over there. And by doing this, it's making it more interesting. I've got the visual things. Maybe you're performing to families. You think the bow might work nicely for you. Maybe you want to give it the fire. Maybe the smoke is the thing that works for you. Maybe all of it. And then there's, I showed the optical move. I'm just going to take out a solid ball out of my pocket as well. Watch this. And it comes off. So, simple techniques again. I'll put the whole routine together so you can see how it all flows as one in a second. But from here, I'm just doing the optical move that you might see people do with the rings, where they hold on to the gap with one hand and their other hand moves around. But by doing that with the ball, it now just gives the impression that the ball starts to move around, which I like. The other ball here, so this is the same as the Ninja Plus move we looked at, where we learnt the diagonal dial movement to take the object off, and that disconnects it. So let's look at all of these different things done up to speed in a context of a routine. So I'm going to put Ninja Plus into my pocket. Oh, got one in there. And let's get going. So a routine using a hoop and a ring. It joins. I can make the ring jump from one hoop straight the way through to another. It disconnects and it joins on. I'll rest that down there. You can examine that. But for now, I've got a different object. It's a ball bearing. I took it out of one of those pinball machines. Let me just warm it up. Atom by atom, proton by proton, electron by electron, it actually welds on. Still tacky. In fact, I can move it around the hoop, but it now becomes more and more solid, so much so that you can examine this and make sure that that's solid as well. I want to take this a stage further. I want to try and make a character, see if you can work out who this is going to be. No, not yet. I'll add this one on as well, and there we go. It looks a little bit like Mickey Mouse. Or, if I finish the flourish off, I'll put the little bow on the top like this, and then it should look a little bit more like Minnie Mouse. One by one, the hoops disconnect. So I can take this off of here. I can move the finger ring from one hoop straight the way through to the other. From the front, it looks solid. From the side, you can see it's disconnected. And now we have to disconnect. What should we take off first? Should we take off the ring or the ball, Brian?
Ring.
Let's take the ring off. So from here, it's a little flick like this, and the ring comes off. Now I shall take the ball. Gentle breath. It warms up. Yeah, it starts to become tacky again, and it should fly right the way off the end, and that's the end of that. So what we're left with is a very different visual routine using different objects, using fairly simple techniques. And this is what I want you to take from a lecture. Don't just join one hoop to another. Think about what else you can do. Maybe you've got another fantastic routine that will link in with this. Maybe there are other visual effects or sound effects that you think you can use. What you should be doing is playing and coming up with something very different than other people. I can use my Ninja Plus routine on its own. I could do it for walk around, or I could use just Ninja Fusion, the trick with a ball on its own. GIR, where the solid rings link and unlink. I can combine the routines together as I like, and it just gives it that fresh feel, like I'm making it up as I go along, and it's so much more fun than just performing a generic linking rings routine. I hope you can apply these techniques to every bit of magic that you perform, and I hope you've enjoyed watching them too. Thank you. Afternoon, I'm Matthew, your
Brian.
Pleasure. I've got a quick message to share with everyone, and that is that I I'll roll my sleeves back. That's how fair I intend to play today. I love the linking. I've got one last one to go. I love the linking rings, and that is exactly what the performance is going to be all about. Now, this is a ring that I wear, but this isn't my wedding ring, but it is a ring that I wear on my finger. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. I have to be careful because this ring can jump from hand to hand and from finger to finger. But remember what I said, I should always keep the ring safe on my finger. Now, what I'd like you to do, Brian, I'd like you to tilt your head back for me. Yeah, a little bit more. That's great. I'm going to rest this on your forehead, round about there. And I'm going to try and find the soft spot. Bring your head forwards, and it really has gone straight the way through. Now, I'm just going to ask, do you wear a ring at all?
Yes.
Could I borrow that? I thought that would add a bit of excitement.
Yep.
You look slightly worried. It looks expensive. At least it was. My ring's joined, your ring's not. But in an instance, everything has changed. You see, you'll notice my ring is now disconnected and your ring is joined. But remember, I should always keep the rings safe on my finger. I'm going to rest that down there. And instead, I'm going to use 3 rings. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to try and join these. I'll try and join the hoops one at a time. There are no holes, no gaps. Just examine, make sure. Nothing?
No.
Looks solid, right?
It does.
Just finding the soft spot, it moves right the way through. In fact, to complete this, I can take another ring as well. And I'm going to join that one on around about here. And I have a little swing. No holes, no gaps, correct? But we go right back where we started with 1, 2, 3, 4 rings. I thought, well, maybe we'll take this a bit further still, Brian. You see, the ring, I thought would take this in a different direction. Hold out your hand flat like a little table. Thank you very much. I was going to pass that from one hoop straight the way through to the other. So you see it moves from one hoop down, it comes off and it joins again. Would you check that for me? Just make sure that there aren't any gaps, there aren't any breaks?
No.
Nothing? Let's try again. 1, 2, 3. And then it moves from one hoop straight the way through to the other one. Check the big hoop, make sure it's okay, make sure there aren't any gaps, there aren't any breaks.
No.
Whilst you're doing that, I've thought I'd borrow your wedding band one more time. 3 taps does this. 1, nothing happens. 2, still nothing. It's the 3rd time. Did you notice the ring vanished? Well, thank you very much. You'll notice for the rest of the performance, I'm going to be looking very much in this direction. Okay, fair enough. But whilst you looked over here, I had the opportunity to make your ring vanish. Not far, just to my back pocket. In my back pocket round here, I've got my car keys. If I come round and take my car keys just on the end, you should notice one thing. Seems a little bit familiar, perhaps? I think you better take that back safe and sound in one piece. Now, I was entertaining the footballer Wayne Rooney the other day and I asked to borrow his wedding ring. Look what I ended up with. I thought, well, there's simply no way that that's going to pass through because you'd need a gap about that wide for that to pass through there. But you just go for it, you see, you just hit it nice and hard and it really does go straight the way through. Wayne seemed to want the ring back, so all I did was I took it off like that and it just came straight the way back again. Now, we've got the ring that's joined. I thought we'd try and make things different again. You see, over the side here, I've got something very different. I've got a ball. Do you know what this is?
That's a ball bearing.
Yeah, it's a ball like you see in a pinball machines. I use a little bit of heat, like this. And as I do, atom by atom, very slowly, proton by proton. Brian, can you notice it going through?
Yes.
If I do that, you should be able to see, actually, is connected to there. Slowly. It's just becoming a bit more tacky. Press your finger down, just hold your finger out, just rest it, it's not moving? No. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to hold on to that, and just to make sure that it really doesn't move, the ball has fused itself straight the way through.
Yeah.
Now I thought I'd make a character nest just to mix things up a little bit more. What I've got is I've got the ring here, so I'll rest this here and I'll hit that down on there. This is going to be the nose. I know it sounds like an unusual thing to say, but just play along. Becomes a character. Have you got it? Who is it?
Mickey Mouse.
I know it's Donald Trump, but thanks for playing. Mickey Mouse. If I take the bow, we add our fine little flourish, and now we've got...
Minnie Mouse.
No, it's still Donald Trump. Would you do me a favour, Brian? Would you hold on to the ball? Hold it nice and tight. The rings part like that. You may rest that down on the table. And I'd like you really closely to watch the centre. Watching? Tell me, do you notice the change? The ring was up like this. But now it's moved to a lower position. In effect, it's moved from the top ring through to the middle. Now I'm going to add a little bit of string as a wick. You see, I'm going to need a bit of heat to move this finger ring from one large hoop straight the way through to the other. I just light it like this, and in that moment, as quick as a flash, the ring moved from hoop to hoop. It may feel slightly warmer. Just check it for me. Does that seem okay?
Yeah.
Now, we're going to take one of these things off. What should we take off first? It's up to you, the ball or the hoop?
The ring.
The ring, yeah. Fine. It's just a little flick like that, the ring comes back off. The ball, it's a gentle breath like that. Very slowly, it moves around and disconnects. But remember what I said to you at the very start, Brian. I should always keep the ring safe on my finger. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.